When a day ends, the frightening thing is not that you are exhausted, but that you cannot remember how you truly lived. No upheavals, no collisions, just a gentle sliding of time. Nothing collapses, it simply drifts, bit by bit. A glance at your phone, a small task postponed, an unnamed feeling that makes you hesitate, then tell yourself, it can wait. No one forces you to be lazy, but no one reminds you to be awake either. And in that space between what is not yet wrong and what is not yet right, you lose the most important thing, the ability to steer yourself. That is when your mind begins to lose its anchor. Not because you are weak, but because there is no inner point of reference to hold on to amidst the countless invisible forces pulling at you in modern life. People are not destroyed by great crises, but by moments worn away in silence, by nameless stagnation, by unnoticed distractions, by weariness no one inquires about. Today's chaos is not loud. It is disguised by comfort, ease, and streams of information that drain your energy without you even knowing you are being controlled. The mind is not a battlefield, it is an ocean. If you do not drop an anchor, it will drift, and that drifting never stops, because the world always knows how to keep you busy, but never how to make you profound. The Stoics saw this thousands of years before neuroscience could name dopamine. They did not need motivation, they did not live on fleeting inspiration. They built for themselves a coordinate system, principles that did not waver even as the world changed. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet wrote in his journals as one who questioned himself. Epictetus lost physical freedom, yet was absolutely free in thought. They knew that if you do not take the initiative to direct your own life, something else will do it for you. Emotions, habits, desires, unconscious reflexes, or simply the common current. And that something does not care who you are, has no goal for you, and follows only one trajectory, drifting. The person who does not know they are being pulled along is the most vulnerable. Without a compass, every direction seems reasonable. And when every direction seems reasonable, you will choose the easy one, the quick one, the one that relieves your guilt immediately, but trades it for long-term loss of direction. That vague feeling, when you do not know why you are tired, why you are busy, why you have lost patience, is the sign of a mind no longer anchored to what is essential. You do not need a personal revolution, you just need a return, a single anchoring. The question is not, what did you do today? It is, what did you choose as your center today? If the answer is notifications, urgent tasks, passing emotions, or reactions to others, you have let life decide for you. But if you have a moment, even just one moment in the day, when you deliberately stop, deliberately look deeply at what matters, that is your anchor. Discipline does not begin with action. It begins with positioning. Only those with an inner point of support can walk steadily in the outer world. No one can see you drifting, but you will feel it, through the way you delay what you know is right, through the choices you repeat that wear you down, and through the strange silence in the midst of things that seem fine. It is the feeling of being hollow in the stream of life, and the only way to stop is to be awake, not by doing more or making longer lists, but by asking yourself, what is controlling me today? Am I living by choice or by habit? Life does not shatter all at once. It cracks in tiny pieces, through prolonged lack of awareness. And if you do not see it, you will think it is normal. But if you do see it, you will understand. Discipline is not about forcing yourself to do everything. It is about daring to choose one thing and refusing the rest, to anchor your mind to one principle, one value, one important thing, and let everything else drift away like waves in the open sea. You do not need more time. You need an anchor. And from that anchor, everything begins to move with meaning. No more nameless days. No more hollow erosion in silence. You are present. You steer. You lead yourself toward the truest version of who you are. The only thing you need to do today, do not drift. Choose one small action to hold yourself in place, one conscious repetition, one promise no one hears but you feel. Because when you begin to live with intention, you are no longer a victim of the current, you become the one at the helm. And that is the first step, not to discipline, but to freedom. When no one is watching, how do you live? Not when you are under pressure, not when there are outside expectations, but in those private moments, when it is only you and the promise you made to yourself. Discipline does not begin with grand actions or optimized systems. It begins with how you treat yourself. It is not something you do for the sake of doing, but the silent embodiment of deep respect for yourself. You cannot demand the world to recognize your value if you continuously compromise on the very things you once swore you would not do. Every time you dismiss a promise to yourself with, "It's fine," you send the opposite signal to your mind, that you are not that important, and inner trust, the only thing that gives you sustainable strength, begins to erode from there. A disciplined person is not someone who is always perfect. They are someone who does not easily betray themselves, even if no one would ever know. Skipping a workout you promised, postponing a goal you have set, eating something off-plan not for your body, but for socializing. You may think these are small matters, but it is precisely these small matters, accumulated day after day, that form the blueprint of your entire life. Because no one wakes up one morning and suddenly becomes weak. People become weak because they have compromised with ease too many times, without realizing they are rejecting their own self-belief. Discipline is not cold. It is not harsh. It does not come from guilt or force. Discipline is a form of mature self-respect. When you practice discipline, you are not limiting yourself. You are protecting what is precious in you from being worn down by short-term temptations. You need no supervision when you have a clear image of the person you want to become, and you understand that every action, even the smallest, from waking up on time to refusing an easy compromise, is a quiet declaration. I am worthy of what I am aiming for. In discipline, you need no recognition, because what you seek is not the outside gaze, but inner steadiness. When you keep your promises to yourself, you are not just completing a task, you are building self-trust, a foundation that cannot be taken away by anyone. A person may speak well, inspire others, and be admired for their achievements, but if they lack the ability to keep silent commitments to themselves, all of that is only temporary display. The core of stability lies in how much you can trust yourself when no one reminds you, no one watches you, and no one applauds you. The way you treat yourself in the moments unseen will shape your entire presence in public. The disciplined person does not need to perform. Their presence carries weight because they know exactly who they are. That calmness comes from a foundation of consistent action, not from eloquent words. They do not try to prove, they simply live with nothing to hide. They do not speak loudly about ideals, they quietly practice them every day, in the kitchen, in the gym, in moments of boredom, even when motivation is absent. Self-respect is not a feeling. It is the result of a chain of actions you do not casually abandon. When you act as though you are worthy of respect, you begin to believe it, and when you believe it, others feel it too. You do not have to say a word. The consistency within you will naturally send out the signal. This is why truly disciplined people are always magnetic, not because they try to impress, but because they show up with inner integrity. Self-respect shown through discipline is also how you protect the future from being sabotaged by fleeting emotions. No one is strong enough to never waver, but the disciplined person knows that wavering is temporary while results last. They do not reject emotions, they simply do not let emotions decide the direction. They place action above feeling, allowing steadfastness to become their companion when inspiration fades. They know emotions are not the enemy, but they are not the guide either. Respecting yourself does not come from treating yourself well in easy ways. It comes from doing what is right, even when it is hard, because you understand your true worth is not in indulgence, but in guidance. Every disciplined action is a way of telling yourself, I deserve to be led towards strength. And if you do this enough times, you do not just become strong, you become unshakable by circumstances. From the outside, the disciplined person may seem dry, but the truth is they possess a rich inner world, one with order, meaning, and depth. They do not need to chase every wave. They choose to live like a mountain, not loud, not flashy, but unmoved in the storm. And because they are not easily swayed, the most important things in their life are not easily lost. Discipline is the mature version of loving yourself. Not the easy kind of love, but love deep enough not to give up, strong enough to say no when needed, and wise enough not to disappoint yourself one more time. In a world quick to indulge, the disciplined person is not the strict one. They are the trustworthy one, and the noblest thing you can do for yourself is to live in a way that you are worthy of your own trust. Start with the smallest thing. Wake up on time. Do not hit snooze. Eat as if your body matters. Work as if you have a mission. And when tired, rest. But do not forget the promise. Because you are not just working, you are shaping the person you are becoming. And in each quiet action, discipline will appear, like a light that needs no spotlight, yet is bright enough for others to see. Most people fear discipline because they misunderstand its nature. They think discipline is limitation, harsh enforcement, a cage that chains personal freedom. They call those who live by rules rigid, conservative, unable to enjoy life. But what they do not understand is this. There is nothing more liberating than choosing your own limits to protect what is sacred within you. Discipline is not the cage that imprisons you. It is a set of laws, personal, private, yet sacred, that you create for yourself to preserve your essence and your direction in a world full of noise. A person without discipline is not free. They live by instinct, by fleeting emotions, by repeated reflexes and external influence. They are easily rebellious, easily exhausted, easily discouraged, easily swayed by whatever is most appealing in the moment. Every time they say, I live by inspiration, I don't want to be forced, they are relinquishing control of their life to invisible forces they cannot even name. And nothing is more dangerous than handing over the steering wheel of your destiny to momentary emotions. True discipline does not come from straining yourself. It comes from clarity. Clarity about what matters. Clarity about personal values. Clarity about what you are building, what should be kept, and what must be discarded. Discipline is an ethical act, because you choose to do what is right for you, even when it is not easy, not popular, and no one is applauding. You act not because someone is watching, but because you will not allow yourself to betray the principles you have established. It is not a punishment. It is loyalty to the highest definition of the person you want to become. The truth is, the outside world has no inherent order. It moves in a chaotic, emotional, sometimes even meaningless rhythm. If you do not establish a strong internal structure, you will be pulled into that vortex and become a faint copy of everyone else. Those who live without discipline often feel directionless because they keep reacting to circumstances instead of acting according to a course. In contrast, disciplined people do not act according to circumstance. They have guiding principles. And that is precisely what prevents them from losing themselves amid constant change. Every person needs a personal code of laws, not to impose on others, but to avoid drifting within their own life. It is a system of codes, things you will not do even if no one forbids them, things you will always keep even if no one knows, and things you choose to reject even if the whole world is inviting you. That code is not a prison, it is the boundary of self-respect, the fortress of true freedom. And when you live within it, you do not feel suffocated. On the contrary, you feel at peace, because you know every action you take serves an intentional structure, not mere impulse. No one forced Marcus Aurelius to write in his journal every night. No one made Seneca refine every word, every thought, every choice. But they still did, because that was how they kept themselves from being swallowed by power, fame, and the chaos outside. That is the discipline of the free. They did not need external law to control them. They had their own moral code, deeper and more steadfast than any punishment. And for that reason, they were the hardest people to manipulate. Living with discipline does not make you lose emotion. It gives you the power to choose how to respond to emotion. It does not turn you into a machine. It keeps you from being dragged around by erratic impulses. It does not suffocate creativity. It protects creativity from being scattered by cheap temptations. When you have an internal structure, your freedom is not a wave, it is a river with direction, strength, and depth. Discipline is a silent agreement with the future. It is when you understand that what you want right now is not necessarily what you need. It is when you dare to refuse something attractive that contradicts your core values. It is when you dare to remain silent instead of reacting too quickly. It is when you choose to act even without inspiration. It is when you practice stability as a duty, not to anyone else, but to yourself. And each time you do so, you affirm, I am a person of order in a chaotic world. True discipline does not create burden. It frees you from regret. Those who live without principles often carry a kind of mental fatigue they cannot name, the feeling of being betrayed by themselves. That feeling quietly erodes trust, energy, and the ability to act. Meanwhile, those who live by a personal code, even when they stumble, can still rise without shame, because they know what pulled them off course, and more importantly, they have a reference system to return to, not by inspiration, but by principle. You do not need to write down that code. You need to live by it. Start with a few non-negotiables, and hold on to them in any circumstance. Do not call it enforcement. Call it loyalty to your future. Because a person who cannot keep their word to themselves cannot hold on to anything for long. And you cannot demand freedom if you will not take responsibility for the very choices you make every day. Discipline is never a cage. If you feel suffocated, perhaps you are living by someone else's laws. Rewrite your own. Not to limit, but to guide. Not to display, but to anchor. Not to restrain, but to unlock a higher form of power. The power to live in alignment with what you believe is right, in every situation, every state, without needing anyone to witness it. That is not just discipline. That is ethical freedom, the highest form of a mature character. You do not need to break anything to lose yourself. All it takes is failing to master your mind for long enough, and you will begin to fall into a state more frightening than a crisis, the nameless drift. There is no loud noise, no clear sign. Everything happens quietly. You still live, still work, still talk, still take part in life. But inside, you begin to wear away. Somewhere along the way, the clarity you once had has faded. The commitments that were once strong have turned into half-hearted intentions. You procrastinate without feeling guilty. You forget what matters without feeling remorse. You live in a blur, where everything is happening, yet nothing truly touches the core of you anymore. Drift does not come from a lack of intelligence or motivation. It comes from no longer being the commander within your own inner space. Your mind is filled with noise, with reflexive decisions, with a patchwork of urgent yet meaningless things. No one has stolen your focus. You opened the door and let everything in. Every notification, every easy choice, every unnecessary click, every unprocessed emotion. And then one day you wake up and cannot understand why you are so tired, not because you have done too much, but because you have done nothing truly intentional. The Stoics saw clearly the nature of disorder. They did not speak of it as physical clutter. They called it the fragmentation of the soul. When you allow your time to be dictated by the trivial, your energy begins to lose direction. You no longer know what truly deserves priority because you no longer set laws for your mind. Anything that interrupts can take up space. Every noise gets an answer. And gradually, that fragmentation makes you lose your sense of self. What is frightening is not the day you fail, but the day you no longer feel any success worth remembering. You accomplish many things, but none with depth. You may work hard all week, yet not recall what the central focus was. And that feeling, the faintness within your own life, is the price you pay for letting go of the wheel of your mind. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. Freedom is the ability to choose what is right and to hold to it. Without an internal structure, you are not truly choosing anything. You are merely reacting to circumstances. Whatever comes first gets done. Whatever is urgent gets priority. But a life of value is not found in urgency. It is found in clarity. And clarity only comes when you are still long enough to define what is truly worthy of guiding you. Every day, without a system, is a day you are ruled by the loudest things: notifications, messages, emotions, trivial conversations. All create a vortex that leaves you unsure where to begin. You try to compensate by doing more, but the more you do, the emptier you feel. Because no action is coming from inner guidance. Your mind is only reacting. It is no longer directing. The price of not mastering your mind is not a visible tragedy. It is a series of days lived as though you were on the sidelines of your own life. You are present, but not truly present. You are alive, but cannot touch the feeling of being alive. And this drift, because it is so quiet, is often not considered dangerous. Yet it erodes you by taking away the smallest pieces of your integrity. You begin to accept things you once would not. You close your eyes to doing things you know do not serve your higher self. You no longer feel ashamed for betraying what you once declared. And that is when you no longer know where you are drifting. Stoicism is not just a philosophy for facing adversity. It is a tool to hold yourself steady through the uneventful days. When everything is fine is precisely when you are most at risk of losing yourself. Because the greatest erosion does not come from pain, it comes from small compromises repeated every day. And only when you realize you have drifted too far from your origin do you jolt awake and try to return. But not everyone has the clarity to recognize it in time. The mind needs an anchor. If you do not drop one, you will be carried away. And in this age, the current is stronger than you think. It is not that you are weak. It is that you lack antibodies. It is not that you are lazy. It is that you are exhausted from constantly reacting to things that do not truly matter. And the only thing that can make you stand still is a return to the core. Who is steering your mind? Who is deciding your priorities? And do you still have the ability to stop and ask, does this serve the person I am becoming? You do not need to start over from a grand turning point. All it takes is one moment of enough clarity to silence the noise. One pause deep enough to look back. One question direct enough to strip away the compromises happening. Each day, if you can reclaim control over one action, one decision, one morning, you have already begun to turn back from the drift. And if you repeat this enough, you will rebuild a navigation system, not to control everything, but to lead yourself without losing your way. Not mastering your mind is the starting point of every long decline, but mastering it does not require you to change your whole life. You only need to begin with one intentional choice, one decision against unconsciousness, one small action that keeps you tied to a larger value. Because real living is not about how much you do. It is about whether you still know exactly what you are living for. No one hears it when you set the alarm for 5 a.m. No one witnesses the moment you turn it off and quietly sit up while your body begs for a few more minutes. There is no audience to applaud when you decline an invitation because it would break a principle you have set for yourself. And no one stands behind you when you open the document, train, study, write or read, simply because you promised yourself you would not abandon the goal. Yet it is precisely these actions no one sees, no one checks, no one praises, that are the purest essence of discipline. Because discipline does not begin with the gaze of others. It begins with the promise you once whispered to yourself. Everyone has a silent promise known to no one but themselves. That promise is often made in a moment of clarity when your mind touches what truly matters. It might be a promise never to harm yourself again. It might be a promise to live a life of depth. It might be a promise to no longer postpone your dream. The issue is not what you promised. The issue is, are you serious enough to keep it when the initial emotion that fueled you is no longer there? True commitment cannot be measured by the amount of work. It is measured by the ability to keep your word in silence, in the absence of an audience. In the ordinary, uneventful, even dull moments, where you could choose the easy way, yet quietly choose the right one. People often mistake commitment for loud declarations. In reality, it is the opposite. The greater the commitment, the quieter the voice. It needs no publicity, no validation, no social media post. It only needs you to keep your word. When you repeatedly break your word to yourself, you do not just lose trust. You begin to dismantle the very architecture of your character. Every time you say just this once, you are rewriting the definition of your own values. And the danger is, such moments do not cause obvious damage. They are light, smooth, easily justified. But precisely because they are light and smooth, you fail to see the extent of erosion they create. Eventually, you no longer believe you will do what you say. And a person who no longer believes themselves has no foundation for any form of sustainable growth. Commitment is not pressure. It is the structure that makes you clear in foggy days, not because you are always strong, but because you have already set up a system to remind yourself, what did I promise? And I will keep it, even if I am the only one who remembers. No one forces you to keep your word, but precisely because of that, when you do keep it, you become a person with inner weight. You do not need to prove it through images or achievements. Steadfastness itself emits a signal everyone can feel. Those who keep their word to themselves walk with a unique certainty, not because they have no doubts, but because they know exactly what is worth overcoming doubt for. The Stoics did not speak much of commitment as an obligation, they spoke of it as a way of life. When Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal every night, he did not do it to display dedication, he did it to remind himself. The person he was becoming did not depend on power, but on his ability to keep his word in every thought, every reaction, every silent choice. And when you understand this, you no longer see commitment as something you must do, but as something you want to do, because it is tied to the identity you wish to shape. Commitment to yourself is also how you reaffirm that you are not easily altered by external conditions. You do not act according to passing emotions. You do not decide under social pressure. You have your own value axis, and you live revolving around it. You are not perfect, but you are consistent. You are not all-powerful, but you are present. You do not always win, but you always show up, because you promised not to leave, especially not to leave yourself. When you build the habit of keeping silent promises, every action you take carries a deeper layer of energy. You no longer act only for the goal. You act for a vow to your own being. That makes even the smallest act sacred. One refusal of temptation, one goal completed, one principle upheld, each is a step deeper into the territory of self-respect. No whip, no reward needed. Only one sentence: I promised, so I will keep my word. Discipline is not loud, it needs no warning, no repetition. It exists in what you do when no one forces you. Those actions are the silent manifesto you sign with yourself. And if you are steadfast enough to keep your word every day, you are not just becoming strong, you are becoming trustworthy, not in the eyes of others, in your own eyes. Commitment is not in the moment you say, I will change. It is in the moment you are tired, discouraged, and still act according to what you once promised. It needs no declaration. It needs repetition. It needs no bursts of motivation. It needs the maintenance of principle. And if you are perceptive enough, you will see, keeping one promise, no matter how small, in an indulgent world, is an act of revolutionary strength. Not because it changes the world, but because it keeps the world from dulling you. Commitment is the foundation, and you build it not with grand feats, but with a chain of quiet actions. Every time you keep your word, you pour another layer of concrete into your inner foundation. Every time you break it, you remove a brick. Remember, you do not need to start with a big promise. Only something real enough, clear enough, and important enough that you are willing to keep it, even if no one sees. Because that is not just discipline, that is honor. And honor, once protected long enough, becomes a character that cannot be bought or borrowed. It can only be built by you, day by day. It is not your words, not your attitude, but your personal discipline that first shapes how others treat you. They do not listen to what you declare, they observe what you repeat. If you frequently arrive late for your own commitments, do not be surprised when others also delay with you. If you easily break your personal boundaries, others will not respect your time, energy, or mental space, not because they deliberately mean to disregard you, but because you have not made clear how they should behave. And in a world that operates more by reflex than reflection, a person who does not set boundaries for themselves will always be pulled into the orbits of others. Discipline is not only a tool to achieve goals, it is a form of invisible communication energy. When you keep the habit of being on time, others feel guilty arriving late to meet you. When you work with structure, others feel uneasy pulling you into their mess. When you say no calmly but firmly, others learn your limits. You do not need to force yourself to be respected. You only need to live clearly, consistently, and faithfully to the principles you have set. That consistency will gradually adjust the energy around you. filter your relationships, and refine the environment you allow yourself to exist in. Those without discipline often fall into a loop of disappointment. They expect others to respect them, yet they themselves do not act like someone worthy of respect. They complain about being disturbed, yet they do not protect their own time. They feel exploited, yet they have no clear boundaries. What they lack is not luck or better people around them. It is a clear behavioral structure that shapes the feedback the world gives them, and that structure only appears when you live with discipline. The truth is, every relationship learns from how you treat yourself. If you overindulge in eating, others will not hesitate to involve you in their own lack of restraint. If you work whimsically, others will not consider your schedule worth respecting. If you do not know how to say enough, others will keep demanding. And then, instead of being the center of an ecosystem of self-respect, you become the low point, where the needs, emotions, and expectations of others easily spill in. Discipline is a kind of frequency. It does not need to speak loudly, but anyone perceptive will notice it. People will not dare to offer you mediocrity if you consistently choose what is decent. They will not dare to challenge your limits if you consistently show that your boundaries are not up for negotiation. Discipline creates a magnetic field, not to push others away, but to invite them into a framework of respect. And those who do not want to live within that framework will leave on their own. That is not a loss. That is purification. You cannot demand the world treat you in a way you have never treated yourself. A person who continually breaks promises to themselves has no moral ground to ask others to be honest. A person who does not keep their own word cannot sustainably build any trustworthy connection. Every action you take in silence is an instruction for how the world should respond to you. And you cannot change that response with words. Only repeated action builds credibility. Discipline is also how you keep your energy from being scattered. When you are not easily pulled away from your value axis, others will sense your steadiness. They do not need to know what you are doing. They simply feel they cannot push you out of your zone of inner control. And that creates a kind of respect that needs no negotiation. Conversely, when you are easily swayed, easily changed by emotions or outside pressure, you lose the right to shape relationships. You will always be the one adjusting to fit, instead of the one setting the standard. The Stoics understood this well. They did not care whether they were liked. They cared whether they lived in accordance with virtue. Because they knew character is not something that can be bought with pleasant words or intentions. It is formed only by living consistently with internal principles. And whoever does this long enough will naturally have a weight that others cannot dismiss. Do you want others to respect your personal space? Be the one who knows how to say no at the right time. Do you want them to respect your time? Do not let them see you waste your own. Do you want others to keep their word? Be the one who keeps yours, without reminders. No orders are needed, only a model. Because people do not learn by being lectured. They learn by observing who actually lives what they say. Discipline is the quietest yet most powerful manifesto. It teaches others what can and cannot happen when they interact with you. It allows you to be respected without speaking, to keep your boundaries without controlling, to be trusted without performing. And when you become such a person, you no longer have to work hard to choose your relationships. The relationships will choose you, or withdraw. Do not teach others to respect you. Live so they have no choice but to. And to do that, start by keeping discipline with yourself, not only during work hours, but in how you live, eat, sleep, rest, respond, refuse, begin and end. Because every action you take is a sentence, and discipline is how you tell the world, I am worthy of being treated right. No one can deceive you more effectively than you can deceive yourself. No one can justify better than your own inner voice when it wants to avoid the truth. You can plan in detail, set clear goals, create a well-structured schedule, but without one foundational element, radical honesty with yourself, all those efforts are just an empty structure. Discipline does not begin with action. It begins with the courage to face the truth you have delayed acknowledging for far too long. And that is always the hardest part. Because you can pretend to the world, but you cannot hide from your own heart in moments of stillness. That honesty is not about saying, "I was wrong" in front of others. It is about the moment, without any pressure, when you dare to look directly at the real reason you procrastinate, break your promises, or betray your principles. You know very well that time it was not because you were busy, not because you lacked time, not because you weren't inspired. It was because you were not clear enough to keep your word. And instead of taking responsibility, you chose a reason that sounded reasonable. Over time, you turn yourself into a professional storyteller, just so you do not have to face the core of the problem. No discipline can be built on the foundation of self-deception. You cannot train yourself if you keep soothing your mind with gentle excuses. The Stoics did not teach you to be harsh, they taught you to be honest. Because only when you see the truth without the lens of justification can you choose the action that truly fits, and that action, however small, carries 100 times more force than grand resolutions built on illusion. Those who lack honesty with themselves often live in a vague state of fatigue. They do not know why they always feel overwhelmed, even though they accomplish nothing clear. They set goals, then feel disappointed, but never ask, "Was I truly serious from the start?" They do nothing gravely wrong, but they repeatedly make the same small error, and that small error is the lack of integrity with themselves. You do not need to break a solemn vow to betray yourself. All it takes is telling yourself, "It's fine" each day about something you once said never to. Honesty is not a default state. It is a decision you make repeatedly, each time you face the choice between comfort and correctness, between continuing to tell yourself a soothing story or remaining silent and accepting that you need to change. The courageous person is not the one who takes grand actions, but the one who dares to call the truth by its real name in their inner life. You do not need anyone to validate it. You just need to see it yourself and not turn away. This honesty can be painful. It forces you to admit that some things you claim are important have never truly been your priority, that some habits you say you are building are actually things you only talk about to feel like you are still trying, that some projects you say are in progress have long been abandoned. You just have not buried them with a clear ending. Every half measure you carry becomes an obstacle between you and discipline. And if you do not clear away those unnamed truths, you will always feel your inner strength blocked. True discipline is a journey back to original honesty. No embellishment, no exaggeration, no dramatizing. Simply, this is what is happening, and I take responsibility for it. From that foundation, all change can take root. You no longer need noisy motivation, because you no longer need to summon emotion to hide the truth. You only need to be present and receive yourself without defense. That is when discipline begins to form, not as a forced command, but as a natural reaction when you live truthfully with yourself. Those who live honestly with their inner world carry a certain kind of energy. They do not need to speak much, do not need to justify, do not need to prove. Their presence inspires trust. Because everyone can sense the coherence when they look at them, they know where they are, they know what is operating inside them, and they are not trying to hide it. They are not perfect, but they are not pretending. And from that lack of pretense, They build a solid foundation for any process of change. Conversely, those who live in self-deception will always be stuck, not because they lack ability, but because they must constantly spend energy maintaining an untrue image. They live in conflict between what they say and what they know to be true, and that conflict cannot create discipline. It only creates inner turmoil, self-judgment, and eventually quiet surrender. No discipline can stand if you have not dared to name the moments you stepped back. No strength can rise if you have not dared to admit you have compromised with the mediocre. Transformation does not begin with determination. It begins with the courage to stop justifying. And when you have nothing left to hide from yourself, you will have no reason to delay real action. Start with a simple question. Am I telling myself the truth, or am I telling a story? If it is a story, stop. And in that stopping you will find the first element of discipline. A cold clarity, yet one that is deep and powerful. Because no one can lead their own life if they are still running from the truth that lives within them every single day. There is no shortage of people with perfect plans. They spend hours setting goals, mapping out habits, coloring schedules, downloading productivity apps. But after a week, everything is messy. After a month, it's forgotten. And eventually they start the cycle again, making a new plan, with more motivation, more sophisticated design, and then quietly failing once more. Not because they lack tools, but because they lack truth. Discipline does not begin with a plan. It begins with an uncompromising conversation with yourself about the things you are avoiding. You can write down the tasks, but if you do not dare to face the truth about why you are not doing them, you will always fall into a state of justified procrastination. You will be busy organizing, but empty in action. You will think you lack a method, but in reality you lack the courage to confront your own dishonesty. Any plan, no matter how detailed, will break if it is built on an idealized version of yourself, instead of the real you with your current limits and conflicts. The first truth you must face is this: some things you do not do, not because you lack time, but because you are afraid. Afraid of failure. Afraid of success and the responsibility that comes with it. Afraid to change the familiar lifestyle. Afraid to lose the comfortable image you have painted for yourself. These fears are often disguised with very logical-sounding reasons. I am waiting for the right time. I don't have enough energy. I want to prepare more thoroughly. But deep down, it is avoidance, and discipline cannot survive in an environment of avoidance. The next truth is this: it's not always that you lack motivation. Sometimes you simply do not want to give up comfort, and if you cannot admit that, you will forever blame the circumstances. You cannot build discipline on soil packed with excuses. You must clear the ground by calling procrastination, inconsistency, emotional fatigue, and even laziness by their real names, instead of legitimizing them as "I need to rest." No one forbids you from resting. But if you call quitting rest, you are killing honesty, the very thing discipline needs to exist. You do not need a map to reach a place you do not dare to look at, and that is why a plan can never replace self-enlightenment. Before you start a new strategy, take time to write down the old truths you have been ignoring. Write directly, without explanation, without sugarcoating. Accept: I didn't do this because I chose comfort over growth. That acceptance is what creates real progress. Discipline does not come from inspiration. It comes from a perspective that does not avoid. The Stoics did not speak much about plans. They spoke about the intention to live rightly. They did not preach about goal boards, but asked, what is right in this moment? And am I living in alignment with it? Discipline is not about how much time you control. It is about how much truth you use to guide your actions. Every schedule is just a shell if there is no inner declaration as its foundation. I no longer allow myself to make excuses. You do not need to know every step. You only need to begin with an action that does not carry pretense. You may not have a complete roadmap, but you can absolutely begin today without lying to yourself one more time. Discipline begins the moment you stop using familiar phrases as shields. I need inspiration. I have to wait for the right moment. I'm not that kind of person. These phrases do not protect you. They only help you delay becoming the version of yourself you already know is right. No growth begins without a pain born of honesty. And if you are brave enough to look at yourself without justification, you are already halfway toward discipline. The rest is simply repeating the right action, even when your mind searches for every reason to avoid it. At that point, every plan you make will have a foundation. They will no longer be painted dreams. They will be structured reflections of an inner self, ready to give up self-deception. Ask yourself, how many times have you started without succeeding? How many times have you told yourself, this time will be different? And how many times have you found yourself back in the same place? The reason is not that you are not good enough at planning. It is that you have not been truthful enough in assessing why you fell off track. Every time you avoid that truth, you write another chapter in the same repeating book, where the first page is always full of expectation and the last page is always abandonment. Discipline does not come to make you perfect. It comes so you stop deceiving yourself. You do not need to start with a complex system. You just need to start with one action that cannot be excused. Each time you act without pretense, you dig deeper into a new foundation. And when that foundation is solid enough, you will no longer have to force yourself into discipline. You will live in it, not as a chain of obligations, but as a natural expression of honesty. If you want to live with discipline, do not ask, what's the next plan? Ask, what truth have I not dared to face? And when you dare to write it down without turning away, you are not just starting a new habit. You are ending a long chain of avoidance. And that is where real discipline begins, in silence, in honesty, in small actions, but no longer tied to any lie at all. Not every model of discipline is meant for you. Waking up at 5 a.m., taking cold showers, running 10 kilometers, doing 8 hours of deep work. These formulas can be inspiring, but if they do not align with your biological rhythm and the structure of your soul, then they are not discipline. They are pressure disguised as ideals. True discipline is not the act of copying successful people, but the meticulous design of a system that works with your natural way of functioning. You do not need to live like someone else to be valuable. You need to live deeply within the way you were shaped, and from there, build a system that has order without betraying your essence. Everyone has their own rhythm. Some people are most alert at dawn. Some are most creative at midnight. Some need repetition to maintain focus. Some need flexibility to sustain inspiration. No single version of discipline is right for everyone. The real danger is when you try to force yourself into a popular mold without listening to yourself. You not only fail, but also feel guilty for not trying hard enough. But you do not lack willpower. You are simply using willpower to go against your own biological and psychological mechanisms. And no one can sustain discipline long-term if it conflicts with their natural structure. The Stoics never said everyone must live the same way. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor living in a palace. Epictetus was a slave living in poverty. Seneca was a statesman navigating the political arena. They differed in status, lifestyle, and conditions, but their common ground was that they lived with structure. and that structure was built from their unique environments and natures. That is the true meaning of discipline, not rigidity imposed from the outside, but harmony between the inside and the outward form. You do not need to wake up early if late nights are when your mind is at its sharpest. You do not need to follow a harsh regimen if your mind thrives better in gentle, bounded flexibility. What matters is not whether you do what others do, but how long you can sustain your own system. And sustainability only lasts when it does not force you to become someone else, but instead draws out the most refined version of you. You are not fighting against yourself to create order. You are walking with yourself, guiding yourself, and gradually elevating yourself, according to your internal rhythm. The truth is, many people fail at discipline not because they are not serious, but because they choose the wrong structure. They borrow a system from someone else, then blame themselves when they cannot sustain it. They do not realize that the wrong structure creates friction, and long-term friction leads to resistance. That resistance breeds fatigue, discouragement, and ultimately surrender. But if you build a structure that is in sync with your natural energy, you will no longer need discipline as a battle. It will become a flow. No straining, just steadiness. This does not mean you have permission to be lax. Discipline still requires pushing yourself, but it must be a reasonable push, the right push, at the right time, in the right form, in the right dosage. Like a person training, not everyone needs to lift heavy, but everyone needs to train with the right technique and intensity for their body. You cannot grow without some stretch, but that stretch must be calculated. Otherwise it will not lead to strength, but to injury. Observe when you work most effectively. Notice the states in which you lose energy most easily. Pay attention to how you respond to rigid schedules. Be honest about how much creative space you need and how many clear boundaries. From there, begin to draw your own system. A system not following trends, not dictated by social expectations, not carrying the pressure of being like successful people. A system that is true to you, reflects you, and carries you far without making you trade away yourself. Discipline is not wearing the same mental uniform every day. It is tailoring yourself a suit that fits, adjustable, adaptable, but always holding its core shape. Do not use someone else's mold to bend yourself. Sculpt the life you are living from the materials you already have. That is the art of disciplined living. Living your own way without indulgence, staying true to yourself without clinging to someone else's imposed model. To achieve this, you must have the courage to discard the standard expectations society builds. You do not need to wake at 5 a.m. to be successful. You do not need to read a book a week to be wise. You do not need a perfect checklist to live with purpose. You only need a few deep commitments and maintain them according to your biological rhythm, psychology, and nature. Steadily, honestly, without embellishment, not to prove anything, but to not lose yourself. Discipline is your ally if you choose the right shape for it. And that shape can only be found when you dare to pause, listen to yourself, and redesign your entire operating system based on deep self-understanding. The right system will not drain you. It will make you sharper, more present, and freer. And freedom, ultimately, is the deepest destination of all true discipline. There is nothing more exhausting than trying to live by a rhythm that is not your own. You set the alarm for 4:30 IAEA not because you feel inspired, but because someone else said it is the hour of successful people. You cram your schedule with reading, meditation, gym workouts, and language study, not because they make you live more deeply, but because you fear falling behind in an invisible race. You are not living to the beat of your own heart, but to the beat of pressure. And gradually you can no longer hear yourself. All that remains is the steady ticking of a borrowed clock, never in sync with the real life you are living. Discipline is not copying someone else's formula, it is consistency with the structure of your own inner world. You do not need to match the speed of the world. You need to rediscover the tempo that keeps your mind steady and clear. Not everyone who wakes early is alert, and not everyone who stays up late is lazy. Do not let glamorous slogans lead you away from your essence. A strategy may be right for one person, but a burden for another, and nothing is more dangerous than assigning a universal solution to a unique mind. When you force yourself to live by a borrowed rhythm, you slowly drift away from your inner strength. You lose your natural sensitivity. You lose the ability to distinguish between what moves you forward and what only drains you. You blindly believe that if you follow the exact schedule of successful people, you will be successful too. But you forget that success does not start with imitation. It starts with self-awareness, with the ability to observe how your inner world operates, how your energy fluctuates, and what structure allows you to shine sustainably. Marcus Aurelius did not start his day with a to-do list. He began by resetting his mind. In meditations, he often recorded morning reflections as a way to remind himself of his reason for living. This was not set to a fixed schedule imposed by others. It was a rhythm he created, one that fit his role, circumstances, mind, and mission. That is strength, not letting the rhythm of the crowd sweep away the direction of your inner compass. You do not need to follow any pace but your own, but you do need to discover it. Observe when you are most clear-minded. Note when your mental energy peaks. Identify the environments that put you in flow. Then build your structure around those moments. That is your own ecosystem, unborrowed, unimitated. It does not need to be flashy, nor does it need others to call it disciplined. It only needs to help you live deeply, truthfully, and rightly. The greatest pressure comes from trying to fit in, but true freedom appears only when you dare to be different. You do not need to resemble an idealized model. You only need to live as a self in progress. And to do that, you must start with rhythm. Discover your biological cycles, listen to your physiological signals, pay attention to the times of day when your mind is sharper. Do not force yourself to read when your body simply wants to rest. Do not push yourself to write when your mind needs quiet. Intelligence is not about how much you can force, it is about how precisely you can coordinate. Prolonged fatigue does not come from doing too much, but from living out of sync with your own biology for too long. And your body reacts. It sends signals through weariness, loss of inspiration, or even aversion to the very things you once loved. This is not weakness. It is your body resisting the borrowed rhythm. And if you do not listen, it will make you pay, through exhaustion, loss of direction, or even silent depression. Do not mistake effort for violence against yourself. Effort is when you go beyond your comfort zone while staying connected to yourself. Violence is when you force yourself into a grind that does not reflect your true values. And you cannot sustain long-term discipline through inner violence. It will backfire. It will erode your self-respect. True discipline does not make you more rigid, it makes you clearer, and that clarity begins when you refuse rhythms that do not belong to you. Return to simplicity. Today, when are you most alert? When are you most easily distracted? What makes you feel a sense of order? What environment makes you feel suffocated? These questions matter more than any checklist out there, because they help you adjust rather than impose. Adjustment is an art, imposition is a trap. And true discipline is when you know how to adjust yourself within a system you choose, not living obediently to a pace someone else has chosen for you. Finally, remember, you do not need to run fast to reach the finish line right. You need to run steadily in the right direction, at a pace that does not rob you of your breath. That is the difference between someone truly living and someone merely trying to live like someone else. Choose your own rhythm, and then make it the strongest melody of your life, because freedom does not come from escaping responsibility, but from mastering the very structure you live by each day. And that can only begin when you stop living to a borrowed rhythm. Disorder doesn't suddenly strike like a storm. It seeps in through the smallest details you've chosen to overlook. An unmade bed in the morning, an email you put off replying to with the thought, "I'll get to it tomorrow." A small decision avoided, a promise you swore to yourself you'd keep, but then let fade into silence. Each time this happens, you don't just forfeit an action, you erode the invisible foundation that shapes your self-respect, and your soul feels it long before your mind admits it. Disorder is not a question of whether you have discipline or not. It is the fracture between what you know to be right and what you choose to ignore. Every time you delay doing something you know you should, you send a quiet signal that you are not serious about yourself. This accumulates. It doesn't explode instantly, but it quietly turns you into a version that is more tolerant of compromise, more willing to retreat, more prone to indulgence. The real cost is not in the immediate consequence. It's in losing the ability to trust yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Do not act as if you had 10,000 years to throw away. Death is on your heels. While you live, while you can, be good." But how can you be good if, day after day, you live amid constant small disorder? No one falls because of one colossal mistake. People fall because they have grown used to turning away from the small right things. And once you lose the instinct to hold yourself steady in those details, you have already started to drift from your core. You may succeed in the outside world, with admiration, wealth, position, but if you let disorder take over your inner life, you will always carry a void that nothing external can fill. That void comes from no longer being strict with yourself, from losing your internal boundaries, from no longer holding a sacred threshold for what is right. And when you lose those spiritual markers, you also lose the ability to tell the difference between a life of dignity and a life of mere comfort. Discipline is not coercion. It is a noble form of order you choose to guard your soul. It needs no witnesses. It needs no declaration. It exists in pushing in a chair after you stand, in remembering a small promise, in completing an action no one is forcing you to do. Steadiness is built on such quiet details. And it is precisely these things that protect your soul from the invisible erosion of ease. If your life feels chaotic, don't look for the cause in the big things. Look at what you've let slip away too easily. Your sleep schedule, how you start your morning, how you speak. The compromises you brush off with, "It's just a small thing." Each time you remove a brick from the foundation of your character, one day you may look back and no longer see clearly which values your life is built on. That is the deepest tragedy, to lose yourself not through one great event, but through failing to keep hold of yourself in the smallest of things. Order is a virtue, and virtue is not for display, it is for protection. When you hold yourself to a high standard in actions no one sees, you make a profound declaration that you do not live to be forgiven. You live so that you never have to apologize to yourself. Your soul feels that solidity. It asks for no reward, it only needs integrity, so that when you look back on your day, you can say, I lived rightly. Sometimes that alone is enough. No one is born orderly, but anyone can choose to start today. Start by straightening one corner of your room, washing your own glass after a drink, taking 3 minutes to review tomorrow's plan, stopping the habit of making excuses for fragile emotions. Each small act is not disciplining yourself, it is rebuilding the tower that once wavered. One act, then another. Certainty returns, not through grand declarations, but through habits that no longer betray you. There are people who seem endlessly busy, yet their lives are a string of chaos without a center. And there are others who do less, yet every action they take carries weight. Because they live with order, everything they do, every word they speak has roots and is not easily swayed. They don't need an audience. They don't need endless explanations. You can see from the way they live. Here is a person with boundaries, with principles, with strength from within. This is the outcome of keeping order in what seem like trivial things. Never judge a person by what they put on display. Look at how they handle what no one forces them to do. For it is in those moments that you see who truly lives with dignity. And the same applies to you. Each day is a chance to return to a truer, tidier, more orderly version of yourself. No one compels you. No one demands it. But if you neglect it, you will pay with a quiet unease, and your soul will be the first to bear the cost. Creativity doesn't come from chaos. It comes from a foundation solid enough for chaos to play without destroying the structure. People often confuse inspiration with impulse, thinking that to create one must be completely free. No limits, no framework, no order. But that isn't true. The human mind, without an anchor, drifts with emotion, and emotions, without discipline, drain the very energy needed to turn ideas into reality. It's not mess that kills creativity. It's the absence of order that keeps you from tapping into your deepest creative potential. Inspiration is fire. Order is the hearth. Fire needs space, but it also needs boundaries, so it doesn't burn everything down. A creative person without order is like a child running through a dry forest with a torch. Brilliant for a moment, but the aftermath is irretrievable. In contrast, the disciplined creator makes time for stillness, organizes their thoughts, and builds an inner space quiet enough for great ideas to appear, undisturbed by trivial noise. In that silence, you can finally hear the deepest thing your subconscious wants to tell you. Many complain they can't create within structure. But ask yourself, is it really the structure, or is it your unwillingness to stay long enough to dig deep? Order is the way you commit to the process. It forces you to show up, to approach the work from multiple angles, to refine details even when the spark isn't there. And it's in those seemingly dull moments that true creativity begins. Not when you wait for the muse to knock, but when you sit down, clear the desk, open the blank page, and act as if inspiration is already present. Order doesn't kill adventure. It keeps you from drowning in the oceans of your own ideas. Look at a musician. Every note follows a principle, yet within that structure lies infinite room for emotional expression. Look at an architect. No blueprint is purely improvised. Creativity isn't about discarding boundaries, it's about playing within them, and sometimes dissolving them masterfully. But to do that, you must master the structure first. Marcus Aurelius wasn't an artist, but he understood the prerequisite of a clear mind. Waste no more energy on what's beyond your control. Control what you can, so the rest doesn't pull you away from your aim. Order is that deliberate control, a choice to conserve your strength for the adventures that matter. A true creator isn't someone always in a frenzy of excitement. They're someone who protects their energy from what drains the spirit, setting principles not out of rigidity, but out of respect for the gift they carry. Creativity demands strength, not the strength to perform, but to endure repetition, to endure solitude, to endure the disappointment of imperfect work. None of that is possible if your life is a mess, if your mind is scattered by hundreds of petty decisions each day. Order isn't just physical tidiness, it's inner minimalism. When you're no longer ruled by fickle moods or unnecessary urges, it's the state in which you can pour your full energy into what matters, without being bled dry by the trivial. A tidy room is a mind with borders. A clear schedule is the soil from which freedom grows. A disciplined process is the ground where inspiration can take root and flourish. You don't have to be rigid to live in order. You just have to understand that creativity, to reach true depth, cannot survive on excitement alone. It needs structure. It needs discipline. And that's what gives you the greatest freedom. The freedom to carry an idea from imagination into the real world without losing it along the way. Not everyone with many ideas is creative. A creative person is someone who can make those ideas real. And to make them real, you need focused energy, the kind that only exists when you live with enough order to avoid the leaks that drain you. Order doesn't make you dull, it makes you profound. Only when your mind is free from clutter can it hold space for big ideas to arrive and stay. So if you've feared that discipline might kill the artist in you, think again. You might not lack creativity, you might just be letting it leak away every day through the disorder you tolerate. Clear your space, guard what enters your mind, simplify the choices that don't matter. Then watch what happens when your mind finally has the quiet to let creativity walk in. The breakthrough doesn't come from spontaneity, it comes from meticulous preparation, silent persistence, and principles kept quietly, known only to you. Order isn't the killer of inspiration. It's the foundation that keeps it from being wasted. And once you see that, you'll stop fearing order. You'll be grateful for it, as a silent friend, always holding the space for the purest part of you to step forward, strong and uninterrupted. Success does not always take the shape of glory. Sometimes it is a sweet sedative that lulls you into a state of lowered vigilance, makes you stop training, and robs you of the fire that once carried you there. When you are at the bottom, you are sharp, but as you begin to climb, the light of achievement can easily make your eyes narrow. And from that moment, if you lack the discipline to keep a hardened mindset, you begin to slip. A victor should never grow soft. On the contrary, they must become sharper than ever, because the real enemy does not come from outside. It is born in the palm of your own hand. When you soothe yourself with the phrase, "I deserve a rest," without realizing that early satisfaction is what dulls the edge of your character. Initial success may be a reward, but if you cling to it, it will turn into shackles. Marcus Aurelius once warned, "The danger is not that you fail to get what you want, but that you think you've already got it and stop living as a student." Let success be only a temporary milestone, not the final destination. The wise never define themselves by victory, they define themselves by their ability to uphold discipline even when no one is watching. They do not let praise loosen their standards. They keep their principles strict, not because others are looking, but because if they let them slip, they know they will be the one to pay the price. Observe a warrior. When the battle ends, the weapon is cleaned and stored, not to be forgotten, but to be ready. A mind that has endured hard training understands that the period after victory is the most fragile. There is no longer external pressure forcing you to keep your standards. No one reminds you of your reason for starting. You must be the one to maintain a steel spirit, even when the outside appears safe. Success makes people lenient not because they are weak, but because they fail to recognize that the enemy has changed its form. Before, it was the fear of failure. Now it is complacency. Both are equally dangerous, but the second is more insidious. It speaks in a sweet voice, telling you, it's okay to rest a little. You've done enough. No one will notice. And if you accept lowering your standards once, you open the door to doing it a second time, then a third, and then forever. Discipline is the fortress that protects you after the spotlight fades. It reminds you that you are not here to live off past achievements. You are here to train yourself into a better version every day. Satisfaction is the trap of those who have once won. Strictness is the ethic of those who want to keep going far. If today you are successful, be grateful. But don't delude yourself. Observe whether that success makes you slow down, makes you reduce your pace, makes you postpone today's work to tomorrow. And if it does, it is no longer a reward. It is a danger that must be cut away with the blade of discipline, by keeping personal standards as if no one had ever handed you a trophy. Marcus never let victory soften his heart. He used power as a test, whether he could maintain wisdom and self-control even when no one forced him to. You should too. True wisdom does not lie in how much you achieve, but in what qualities you keep after achieving. What makes people respect you is not what you have done, but how you still keep yourself when nothing compels you to try any more. So stay alert. Check yourself every day. Success is not a reason to live easily. It is a signal to live deeper, hold firmer, and go further. When no one else is watching, you still have yourself, and if you truly respect your journey, you will not let success make you soft. You will use it as a mirror to reflect on yourself and harden even more for the next stretch. Inspiration is an unpredictable gift. It comes like a passing breeze, and if you only work when it blows through, you will live a life of dependence. Those who build something great don't wait for inspiration. They act as if it's a ritual, steady, deliberate, and unshaken by emotion. They understand that the most important moments rarely come when you feel excited, but at the very point when you're tired, doubtful, and tempted to stop, yet still choose to move forward. Waiting for inspiration is the luxury of someone who has not yet understood willpower. Acting without it is the highest proof of loyalty to your goal. Ordinary people choose the easy thing when it feels easy. The disciplined choose the right thing even when it feels uncomfortable. Greatness doesn't grow from emotion. It grows from emotionless consistency, from doing what must be done even when no one encourages you, no one sees it, and you yourself feel no excitement. If you've ever thought, "I'm not in the mood today," that is exactly the day you should do it most, because that day is the test. It asks, do you live by moods or by principles? Do you depend on motivation or do you generate it through action? When you get through a day in which you didn't want to do anything, but still did, you don't just take a step forward. You re-establish your identity. I am someone who keeps my word, even to myself, when no one can make me do it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do what is in your nature to do, steadily, without haste, without the need for reward. For doing the right thing is the reward. Acting when uninspired is living in alignment with your highest nature, self-mastery. You refuse to let feelings dictate behavior. You don't hide behind the excuse of not ready to avoid doing what's right." Inspiration is a good starting point, but it is not a foundation. If you build your life on inspiration, it will collapse the moment you fall into emptiness. But if you build it on habits, principles, and repeated action, you will keep going, even through the foggiest days. That is resilience, and in those very moments your spirit hardens like steel, no longer fragile to the swings of your moods. The mature don't ask, "Do I want to do this?" They ask, "Is this worth doing?" And if it is, they do it, regardless of mood. They know that mastering behavior is mastering destiny. Each time you act without inspiration, you train your own nervous system to understand that action comes from choice, not from feeling. No one escapes the empty mornings. No one has motivation every day. But only the strong know that this doesn't matter. They rise, work, train, reflect, and complete their tasks, without applause, without enthusiasm. Because they hold a personal definition of honor. I will not betray my ideals just because today I feel bored. Acting without inspiration is how you prove to yourself that you are trustworthy, and once you trust yourself, your ability to work without emotional fuel, you become dangerous. You no longer wait to feel ready, you begin. And beginning is exactly what ignites the energy you've been looking for. Action always comes before inspiration. Inspiration follows as a reward for courage. The strongest souls are not the ones always ablaze with passion. They are the ones who always keep their word. They live like warriors, training daily, writing consistently, doing the hard things, finishing what they start, not because they feel it, but because they have bound themselves to seriousness, self-respect, and independence from the gamble of fleeting moods. If you are waiting to feel inspired before you start, stop. Start so you can feel inspired. Do what needs to be done, simply, cleanly, without bargaining with emotion. A focused life is built from the days you don't feel joy, don't feel inspired, don't feel cheered on, yet still move forward alone. Greatness does not wait for inspiration. It is forged in every act, every day, every breath, in which you keep discipline as a silent promise to yourself. Don't let emotion decide what you will do. Let the values you believe in speak. And when you work in emptiness, you are not meaningless. You are building the most unshakable thing in life: self-respect. There is a fine line, but one that determines everything, between someone who lives with intention and someone who merely exists on autopilot. It is the ability to recognize, is this something I am choosing, or am I merely reacting? Most of the time, people are not truly living. They are only reacting. A hurtful remark, they react. A flattering compliment, they react. A piece of worrying news, they react. There is no pause, no space to recognize, am I actually choosing this? No freedom can exist without the ability to observe yourself in the very moment of decision. Most anger, sadness, impulsiveness, or temptation does not originate from the outside world. They are the result of you abandoning your right to choose your response, leaving it to the ancient instinct to act in place of the awakened self within you. A mature mind is one that can see its own thoughts before turning them into actions. True freedom is not doing whatever you want. It is knowing exactly what you are doing and why. Self-mastery does not mean being without emotion. It means being able to see emotions arrive, recognize them, yet not allow them to take the reins. The moment you take one step back and quietly ask, is this truly my choice? That is the moment you re-establish your inner sovereignty. Every unconscious reaction carries a cost: your honor, your peace, your dignity, or your time. And you pay that cost simply because you did not pause to ask. The ancients once said, never let anyone force you into becoming something you did not choose. They may be angry, they may insult you, they may try to wound you, but your response remains territory over which you have full authority. If you lose your temper, it means you have handed them the key to control your inner world. If you lose your composure, it means you have let instinct lead instead of intellect. No one can force you to feel envy. No one can force you to feel rage. No one can force you to feel anxiety. All of these are allowed to arise, but you can let them pass like clouds without letting them turn into storms. The weak use emotions as an excuse to act. The strong use awareness to choose their behavior. So whenever you feel yourself on the verge of reacting, stop. The breath is your ally. One deep inhale, a pause of a few seconds, can save you from hours of regret. In that pause, ask yourself, does this action reflect my values, or is it just a mechanical survival reaction? If the answer is unclear, it is better to remain silent. The mind needs discipline, but before that, it needs light. No one can train themselves if they still confuse themselves with their fleeting emotions. No one can stand firm if they still believe they are victims of circumstance. Inner freedom begins with a clear distinction. Emotions are something you experience, not something that defines you. Reaction is instinct, but choice is strength. Do not let a single impulse destroy the calm you have cultivated. Do not let an offhand remark turn you into someone who throws stones back. Every action you take is writing the definition of who you are. So write it consciously. Choose what reflects stability, not weakness. Choose what shows reason, not panic. Choose silence if wisdom has not yet been found. One who is led by their emotions is bound by an invisible rope. One who can see their reactions and choose their responses has removed the chains from themselves. Freedom does not exist outside. It is the ability to govern within. And everyone is worthy of it if they have the discipline not to become slaves to what is fleeting. Your silent version, the thoughts you have when no one is watching, the way you act when no one is judging, the way you respond when no one is keeping score, is the core that shapes everything you eventually become in public. It is not the spotlight, but the darkness of consistency that carves the true image of a person. Others may see the results, but only you know which parts were not staged for display. No credibility lasts if it is not supported by quiet, steadfast principles. What you repeatedly do each day, without needing to prove or be recognized, will gradually align with the frequency of your character, and that character, something you cannot fake, dress up, or force, will emit a silent language that others can feel, even when you are not trying to impress. You do not need to shout to prove you are trustworthy. You only need to keep your word once you have given it. You do not need to race to show that you are moral. You only need to live without betraying what you believe. In a noisy world, the one who can remain silent while holding firm to their integrity is the one who makes others stop and take notice. Appearance can deceive the unperceptive, but the energy emitted from repeated behavior cannot be concealed for long. You can pretend to be good, to be smart, even to be noble, but you cannot pretend to be consistent. People do not trust you because of what you say, but because of the feeling they get every time you show up. That feeling is not born from a speech, but from thousands of silent choices you have made. That is why inner discipline is more important than any title. It is the invisible army that precedes you into every room. It shapes how others react to your presence. Do they listen? Do they respect you? Do they trust you? These things do not come from oratory skills, but from the mirror you have built for yourself in hours unseen. It is not a polished speech or a curated image that makes you memorable. It is how you keep your word when no one forces you to. How you still wake early to learn, still train, still read, still check yourself, even when no one asks. From those choices, character is formed, and from that character, credibility is established. The public is the effect, your private space is the cause. If in silence you let go, then in the light you can project nothing more than a facade. Those with real inner strength never rely on the crowd to validate their worth. They only need to know, I have lived true to what I choose to believe, and that is enough. Strength does not come from being flawless. It comes from whether you correct yourself in silence, whether you stand back up when no one is watching, whether you are honest when no one knows you are lying. If you can do that, you do not need anyone's recognition. You will radiate a power that makes your very presence your testimony. Do not build an image, build the entity. An image is something others can copy, remix, or imitate. The entity is something only you can create. Through your silent living, your choices that require no applause, and the discipline you impose on your own mind each day. Ask yourself, if one day there were no social media, no audience, no recognition of any kind, would what remains inside you be enough to make you respect yourself? If the answer is yes, then you have begun to live by a standard that cannot be shaken. If not, then every bit of your shine is only the spotlight on an empty shell. So, return to your silent version. Look at how you start your day, how you treat yourself when no one is watching, how you face temptation when no one will find out. That is the true mold of character. And a solid character will stand even when every stage collapses. The person worthy of stepping into any position is the one who does not wait for an invitation to start living right. They do not need favorable conditions to live right. They choose what is right because it is the only way they can feel they are still standing tall in their soul. And that is what makes them truly trustworthy, memorable, and irreplaceable. Your silent version is the prophecy of the public figure you will become. No need to boast, just be consistent. No need to chase perfection, just never betray your core values. Keep quietly doing what is right, and time will leave you with a character that cannot be bought and cannot be faked. Most of what you call laziness, lack of motivation, or loss of focus is not the fault of willpower. It is the result of a nervous system that has been programmed by dopamine. Your brain no longer seeks what is meaningful, it seeks what feels most pleasant in the short term. Every time you scroll on your phone, postpone your work, or click to watch one more video, you are reinforcing a loop: immediate reward, little effort, no commitment. And your nervous system remembers that as a life pattern. Dopamine itself is not bad. It is the biological drive that pushes you to act. But when it is attached to the wrong targets, when pleasure comes from consuming instead of creating, from escaping instead of confronting, from ease instead of challenge, it pulls you away from yourself. Every time you choose the easy path, you teach your brain that hard things are not worth it. Every time you choose quick results, you teach your nervous system that slow is wrong. And every time you choose stimulation, you teach yourself that stillness is useless. The problem is this: fast rewards make your brain accustomed to high stimulation, but the things that truly matter require patience, repetition, and often bring no immediate reward. You want to learn a skill? Dopamine tells you, too slow. Switch to another video. You want to build discipline? Dopamine interrupt. This doesn't feel good. Stop. You want to write a book, build a career, improve your fitness? Dopamine suggests postpone. One scroll through TikTok will relieve the pressure. And so you live under the illusion that you are trying, when in reality you are letting your nervous system choose for you. Not because you lack intelligence, but because you have not reprogrammed your rewards. True reward is not the momentary satisfaction you feel, it is the ability to live with direction in the absence of instant gratification. Discipline is, I know I'm not in the mood, but I do it anyway. I know dopamine is not rewarding me, but I still move toward what matters. If you want to reclaim your life, you must begin rebuilding your rewards. Teach your brain that the discomfort you feel when learning is a sign you're on the right track. Teach your nervous system that patience is the mark of mastery. Teach your mind that repetition is not boring, it is the foundation of freedom. Start small. Instead of checking your phone when your mind is empty, sit for 5 minutes with yourself. Instead of clicking "Watch next," stop and finish what you were doing. Every such action is a biological vote. You no longer want to live as a hostage to dopamine. Rebuilding rewards does not mean you must live ascetically. It simply means you don't let instinct decide in place of will. You create excitement from doing what's right, not from doing what's easy. You turn progress into a reward. You turn focus into dopamine. You turn steady action into a source of joy. And at that point you'll realize you don't need inspiration to act. Action itself brings inspiration. Your brain is always learning. The question is, what are you teaching it? If every time you're bored you escape, every time you're tired you delay, every time it's hard you choose something easy, you're programming a fragile nervous system, one that cannot tolerate imperfection. But if you persist one step more, refuse to give in to passing emotions, refuse to obey temptation, you are building a strong biology, capable of withstanding instability and controlling the process. Success does not come from having the most energy, it comes from controlling the energy you have and knowing where to direct it. When dopamine no longer controls you, you can invest in things that are not attractive at first, but will last for the long term. And when that happens, you are truly free. Free from the pressure to be constantly stimulated, free from the fear of stillness, free from the need to feel good right now. And in that freedom, you find the quality all disciplined people possess: purposeful calm. Rebuilding rewards is not a one-day task, but it always begins with a single moment. The moment you look directly at an unconscious behavior and ask, is this serving me or just soothing me? If it only makes you comfortable but does not take you where you want to go, stop, redirect, choose again. And every time you choose to act, even when dopamine does not reward you, you are rewriting the operating system of your own life. Discipline doesn't require you to become a flawless clock. It only needs you to get back on track, the moment you realize you've strayed. Not all successful people have never quit, but they are the ones who know how to return faster than they ever thought possible. They don't judge themselves for a wasted day. They don't drown in guilt over a moment of distraction. They know what matters is not never falling, but not letting a small fall spiral into a long slide. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to remember what matters and come back to it, minute by minute. Have you ever had a lazy morning and let the whole day collapse into chaos? That's a common trap. Once you feel you've broken the streak, you automatically abandon the entire system. But if you understand that discipline doesn't depend on a flawless streak, but on the ability to recover, you will act differently. The moment you eat off plan, return to clean eating for the next meal. The moment you lose focus for an hour, get back to the task instead of blaming yourself. And if you've fallen off discipline for an entire day, come back in the evening or tomorrow morning. As long as you return, you are still keeping discipline. Discipline is a dance between intention and reality, and like any dance, there will be moments you miss a beat. The important thing is you don't leave the dance floor just because of one wrong step. Learn to return, without noise, without announcement, without needing perfection. Just come back, with humility, honesty, and a little kindness for yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Return to reason if you have strayed. Do not be ashamed. That is normal, and reason will welcome you like an old friend." That's how he described the spirit of recovery, not by an impossible ideal, but by a quiet steadfastness. Your nervous system doesn't need perfection, it needs consistency. It needs to be taught that even if you miss a beat, you will still return. Even if you drift for a day, a week, you can still re-establish the framework. And it is the act of coming back after disruption that will strengthen your nervous system even more than maintaining an unbroken streak. You don't sink into guilt. You don't deceive yourself with excuses. You only need truth and one step back into alignment. One of the biggest mistakes of the undisciplined is waiting until tomorrow, next week, or next month to start again, as if a formal occasion is required to return. But discipline doesn't wait for perfection on the calendar. It only needs one honest minute. Right now. No spotlight, no announcement to anyone. Just you. And the quiet choice to return to what matters. When you understand that, you start living lighter. You no longer punish yourself for small failures. You no longer force yourself to maintain a perfect streak, only to shatter when it breaks. Instead, you focus on the long road, on each step, on each breath. You learn to adjust yourself, like someone steering a boat down a river. Not trying to control the water, but learning to return to course after each drift. A disciplined person is not one who is always strong. It's one who always returns. They know when they're being pulled by fleeting emotions. They know when instinct is starting to take over. And they don't deny it. They observe and then they choose again. Without irritation, without excuses, without needing perfection. They understand every moment is an opportunity to begin again. If today you feel you've gone off track, it's fine. If this whole week has felt messy, that's fine too. The only thing you need to do is stop the slide. Reset your intention, choose your action again, and start again from this minute. Discipline doesn't require you to be superhuman. It only requires you to be honest and willing to return, bit by bit, to what truly matters. Because in the end, your life is not determined by the times you were perfect, but by the times you chose to return after you fell. And if you keep doing that, day after day, month after month, you won't just build discipline, you will build a life with a solid core, a life in which every moment, whether straying or returning, is an expression of a truly free person.